there's a subject that we're not allowed to talk about. There's a subject about something that if we talk about on a platform like this, we get taken off. There's a subject that is so bad and so awkward that it is very tricky to get it out to the general public. Yet we know that this is going on. And I think if the public knew just how wide this is going on, they would be incensed. And the problem is, we can't talk about it unless we talk about it in code. And so it's very difficult to do that, because if you talk about it in code, you don't have the same impact as if you are actually being able to give real live examples or talk to people who've had this happen to them when they were younger and be able to sort of whistleblow a little bit. But there is this subject that is so out there and so off the table, and yet all of us, people, those who, let's say, have, well, we've all been in this state before we were adults. And so therefore, when we were in this state before we were adults, we know how vulnerable we were, because we were naive by default, because when we started out, we didn't have knowledge about anything. And so we were very naive about all sorts of things, particularly people who might approach us and they may have bad intentions, and people of that naivety in that state could disappear, and they do. And this subject is so horrific and so awful that people want to put their head in the sand and don't want to face it. And yet, in a way, this subject is the currency for a lot of the bad stuff that is going on. So stuff is going on, and this subject is what's fueling it. And people are just not aware of how much this is going on. We hear the odd scandal here and there, and we get the odd bit, and there'll be a lot of newspaper coverage, and there'll be a big distraction on something that's bad, but not as bad as the subject really is. And the fact that it's a currency, and the subject itself and those connected with the subject are being, it's very difficult for me to put this into words, you see, because I have to be careful, but it is being on a huge scale. And the terror and the hardship and the pain for not just the subjects themselves, but those all related to it, if those subjects aren't around anymore or suddenly vanish or disappear. And the things that they're being used a lot for, when things are, let's say, extracted and supposedly have a certain innocence about it. And there are some that are, let's say, more attractive, these subjects, than others. And so some are perhaps, what should we say, there's part of those subjects, bits that are used, and others are abused. See, it's very difficult, because I want to tell you exactly what's going on, but I'm having to infer, and I think you, the audience, are clever enough to get what it is I'm saying. Now, we can't talk about this in these platforms, but we can talk about this privately. And there are other channels, such as Rumble and Odyssey, Brand New Tube, and so on and so forth, that people are able to talk a little bit more about it and share that content. I don't even want to put a link to any of that content in this video, because I feel that that would be too much. But this is such a horrific subject, and I think you're getting the sense of it, that we're all I mean, as human beings, we create more human beings, and so therefore we know what we're talking about. And so therefore, this subject needs to go out. We need to be getting more people aware that this is going on. I believe that there's an actor, Mel Gibson is an actor. And I believe that Mel Gibson is in films. I think he was in some Mad Max films at one point. I think he's made a recent film, a film that you wouldn't expect from a Hollywood actor, that might relate to the subject, that's perhaps worth looking at and exploring and thinking that's just one example of what's actually happening on a massive scale. And that if the general public really knew that this particular subject was happening on a massive scale, and by whom, I think the towers of authority, governments and other places who may be participating in this, or perhaps have, how can I put this, material about their involvement in this subject held over them, then all of that would come crashing down. And I don't think that would be a bad thing if it came crashing down, because of the policies that these people are bringing to us that we've never asked for. So here's an example of me struggling to talk about something I'm not really supposed to talk about, and I'm not talking about it. But hopefully I am talking about it, and that you understand what it is I'm talking about. The question is, how do we make this subject that we are able to talk about it and save ourselves from the tyranny, if you like, of what the people who are involved in this subject are really doing? That's over to you. I'll be interested in your thoughts.